Hello and welcome to Carpet City Cinema, a Gila Films podcast. This is David Weaver. And start off just by addressing some sad news that you may have seen on Facebook over the last few days, which is that we very, very unfortunately got the news a few days ago that Michael Alessandro de Gaetano, director of UFO Target Earth, the film 1974 cult movie that Gila Films will be restoring, unexpectedly passed away at the age of 85. This happened on Sunday, June 11th. Again, completely unexpected. 3 days prior, he had been out for a morning walk inside a mall near where he was staying in Arizona with his sister. He was always very health conscious when we talked, and he had mentioned to me that he did these walks in the mall just to kind of stay in shape, and he fell and unfortunately hit his head, had a skull fracture. There just wasn't anything they could do to alleviate the situation, and passed away 3 days later on that Sunday, June 11th, and fortunately did have his family with him at the time. Just a great personal loss. I never could have imagined that this movie that I loved to view as a kid, that always had this special place in my love for cinema, that years later, decades later, I would not only be able to talk to the man who made it, but also be personally involved in bringing new life to it. And I would have been satisfied with just one conversation with Alessandro, but was incredibly fortunate to develop a friendship with him, and talk to him many times throughout the last few years. We actually just talked probably about 5 weeks ago. We're discussing finally kind of getting down to the extras for UFO Target Earth. Alessandro, early in his film career, had been an assistant to Bill Rebane, a very famous cult filmmaker based out of Wisconsin, who directed movies like The Giant Spider Invasion and Monster Go-Go, and still alive, still up in Wisconsin. And Alessandro was looking at taking a visit to see him, and was wondering if I wanted to meet up with them and could shoot some interviews. So yeah, it just sucks. There's really no other way of putting it. He was just an incredibly good, kind-hearted person. He was always very supportive of everything I had going on. Always wanted to check up on how I was doing, how my girlfriend was doing. He was a creative force to the very end. He was continually developing new projects, both for stage and screen. He was involved in a stage production out in the Midwest that he had been working on for some time. It was a real passion project of his about the life of singer Myra Taylor, whom he had known in real life. He was constantly writing scripts for movies still, right to the end. It's just really, really, really. Obviously, 85. It's great. It's a great number to reach, but he just had so much vitality to him, and so much that he still wanted to do. That even at that age, it seems like so much was lost. I had a chance to talk with his sister. Never spoke with her before. Younger sister, really sweethearted lady. That's who he was kind of staying with at the time. And just she's held on to his cell phone since he passed away, and has been getting all kinds of calls, expressing condolences and stuff. And so it's really nice to see the degree to which he touched other people, even though he's best known for his work as a filmmaker, and even that he's not really a well-known name, but yet he touched so many people. I think his work's really interesting in the way I think it maybe reflects his own life. He grew up in the Midwest, northern Midwest, and he was born in 1938, and he was gay. So you can imagine what it was like to grow up during his time period in the the 50s in that part of the country. And he spoke to me about that, the difficulties he encountered, being gay in that kind of a situation. And I believe you can see that reflected in his work, especially his work in the 70s. This feeling of being an outsider, which I can imagine is what it must have been like for him growing up. I mean, you look at those first few films from the 70s that he directed, even starting with UFO Target Earth. The premise of that film being there's this college post grad down in Georgia, who named Alan, who becomes aware of extraterrestrial activity in his surrounding area, and decides to, against kind of the advice of colleagues, decides to research it and to go into the depths of the Georgia backcountry, accompanied by a sensitive named Vivian. And so the fact that those characters are kind of going on this journey against common sense, for lack of a better word, that makes them kind of outsiders, but also they're outsiders in the sense that there is a detachment between them and regular society in that movie. Vivian being so hypersensitive to the phenomena going on in the area. There's a scene where she has almost like a seizure breakdown in a bar at nighttime, and people are giving her strange looks. And Alan, because of these memories he has from his childhood and this connection he feels he might have to the alien activity, something which gets explained at the end of the film, that really shows his sense of being an outsider within the narrative. You go into this next film, Alessandro's second film that he directed, Haunted, which is the famous telephone booth in a cemetery horror movie that starred Virginia Mayo and Aldo Ray. And that film takes place mostly in an abandoned, rundown movie ranch, which Mayo owns and lives on with her two sons and a caretaker. And the whole film revolves around these people being isolated on this barren location. But even more so than just a physical sense of isolation for the characters, is that they also, like in UFO Target Earth, these characters, to a degree, more so Virginia Mayo and Aldo Ray's characters, seem completely disconnected from the world around them. And Mayo's kind of even living in this, partly in this kind of like a dreamlike, looking back at the past existence. And then after Haunted, Alessandro directed the basketball comedy Scoring, also was released under the title Dribble, and it starred Pistol Pete Maravich. And yet again, that movie, even though it's a basketball comedy, a sports comedy, but it's about women's basketball players at a time when they were less accepted than now, which you could argue even now they're not as accepted as they should be. But still, that's kind of like a look at a certain subsection which you could look at as outsiders, women basketball players. And it was actually his last film that he directed, Butch Camp, 1996, which is completely about LGBT characters, where it's a comedy starring Judy Tenuta, the stand-up comic who actually just passed away not too long ago, as a drill instructor, a butch drill instructor whose job is to get more effeminate gay men toughened up. So yeah, it's definitely a difficult journey for Alessandro in light of the times and the place he grew up and being gay. But he did find his calling in the arts. Worked on, I think I've talked about this in prior episodes, but worked on the stage, behind the scenes in New York City. Worked for Cinerama, the famed distribution company. Worked for Bill Rebane, and then began his own career directing and writing. So he will be really deeply missed, and just really sucks to lose a friend. We're still gonna move forward with the Blu-ray release and the restoration. Now that we're kind of looking at everything kind of wrapping up with Last Frankenstein, that's really kind of the next project to move on to, and it'll definitely be something we hope will be a tribute to Alessandro, and hopefully get that out to not just physical media, but even some film festivals. And when I spoke with Alessandro's sister, um, and she was really cool with this, as I mentioned the idea of, like, maybe coming out and visiting you and interviewing you and kind of making a little a video featurette on the release as a kind of a tribute to Alessandro and his career. So hopefully that we'll be able to do that in the absence of Alessandro's own participation. Fortunately, he had told me a number of crazy, incredible stories about UFO Target Earth, so we'll still be able to relate those on the physical media release. But most important is just that first film of his finally be given the restoration it's due. Remember when he saw the test scans of the reels, the negative reels he sent me. He was just really blown away because it had been so long since he'd seen it like that. He hadn't seen it in that state since the theatrical release. So that's 45 years. Because after that was just that one VHS master. So a huge rest in peace to Michael Alessandro de Gaetano. But moving on to happier things, again, touching upon The Last Frankenstein, I did have an email communique with our distributor, just checking up on how things are going, and everything's moving along well, and he hopes to have some more information to me soon, because they're in the process now of building out the disc. So not super specific update, but just that things are getting closer. And also, in terms of the Gila Films family, the Last Frankenstein family, some good stuff going on. Our producer extraordinaire of The Last Frankenstein, Jay Leonard, we've been talking about his newest feature film, Break Glass, and its journey along the film festival circuit. Well, next up is its screening at the Jersey Shore Film Festival next week, Wednesday, July 5th, 7:15 at the Axelrod Performing Arts Center. If you're in the area, go check it out. Show them some support. Show them some love. Also, really excited to see that Planet B234, which is a introspective science fiction feature made by several of the Last Frankenstein cast members, has finally hit Amazon Prime. This was a real labor of love for Keely Sheridan and Jorge Luna, who in The Last Frankenstein played the roles of Paula, the nurse with the checkered past, and Patrolman Rivero, the mustached Oklahoma highway patrolman in the flashback. They really put their heart and soul into this movie. Keely directed it, Jorge wrote it, and also starred in it. And also starring alongside Jorge is his son, Odo Luna Caratini, also a veteran of The Last Frankenstein. He plays the boy in the opening of the movie. So this film has already been on the film festival circuit and is finally now on Prime. So please check it out. Give it some love on their rating systems. That always helps with their algorithms. Give some likes to their Facebook page for that, and they also have an Instagram and Twitter for that film specifically as well. And for all local listeners, the movie was partially shot in Amsterdam, actually the same sassafras preserve that served as the home to the opening of The Last Frankenstein. So definitely check that out. And definitely want to tip our hat to a few legends who unfortunately left us recently. And the first of those would be Treat Williams, the beloved actor, age 71, died in a motorcycle accident. He was up in Vermont when this happened because he had at least part-time of the year residence there. But they actually took him following the accident to Albany Med, which is only about 35 minutes from my house. Very tragic. And again, like Alessandro, very unexpected. Of course, a legendary actor of the 70s and 80s, starred in such acclaimed films as Sidney Lumet's Prince of the City, Milos Forman's Hair, Smooth Talk. But unfortunately, despite these high-profile projects, was never really able to fully cement himself as a leading man, as a long-standing film star. He, again, worked with these huge directors on these big acclaimed projects, but just wasn't able to transition that into an actual career as a major player in Hollywood. But as years passed, he continued to do some really good character work. He was in Danny Boyle's 127 Hours, where he played James Franco's dad. Showed up in Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. Of course, starred on the TV show Everwood on the small screen. Um, got an Emmy nomination also for the TV movie The Late Shift. And cult film fans love him for such films as Deep Rising, the Substitute movies, The Phantom, and of course Dead Heat, which is basically the action cop buddy genre melded with the horror movie genre. If you haven't seen that movie, check it out. Treat Williams and Joe Piscopo as cops, with Treat Williams throughout the film slowly becoming one of the undead as they uncover this sinister plot regarding zombies and the reanimated. Really fun flick with a great cast. Darren McGavin's in it. Vincent Price, directed by Mark Goldblatt, who is better known as an editor. Cut a lot of big movies like Terminator 2, but also directed this and The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren. And one of the things, I don't know if I'd known this or had just forgotten about it, but is that Treat Williams was in The Empire Strikes Back. He basically was on set hanging out with people while they were filming and was like, this looks like a lot of fun. Why don't I just be in the movie? So he plays one of the Echo Base rebel soldiers during the beginning of the film on the planet Hoth. Don't know if you can even really spot him, but there are some really great behind-the-scenes photos you can find of him in costume, hanging out with Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill. Just, yeah, why not? Why not be in a Star Wars film if you can? It's interesting how that's kind of something a little more common now. You know, you have people like Daniel Craig and Joseph Gordon-Levitt showing up in cameos in these movies, Kevin Smith. But back then, that was just the second film, and he's just having a good time hanging out with people. So definitely sorry to see that we lost him. I actually haven't seen Prince of the City in a while, and I just got the Blu-ray, so I definitely need to check that out again. It's been a while. We also lost two-time Academy Award-winning British actress Glenda Jackson, age 87. Jackson took home Best Actress Oscars for Ken Russell's Women in Love, and also for the hit romantic comedy A Touch of Class opposite George Segal. And she was also nominated for Best Actress for John Schlesinger's Sunday Bloody Sunday and for Hedda. Great career, though. Again, all these films throughout the 70s, like House Calls with Walter Matthau, and they again teamed up for Hopscotch a little after that. She was in The Romantic Englishwoman with Michael Caine. She made some other films with Ken Russell, like The Music Lovers, and showed up in Mary Queen of Scots, where she played Elizabeth I, a role she's best known for playing on the small screen. She starred in the acclaimed miniseries Elizabeth R, and actually won 2 Emmys for her work on that miniseries. And she and Segal did another romantic comedy after the success of A Touch of Class. They partnered up once again with that film's director, Melvin Frank, and made the movie Lost and Found. And also on the small screen, worth noting that she played the title character in the Patricia Neal story, the biopic on the Academy Award-winning actress and wife of Roald Dahl, who had to come back from a stroke that derailed her career for several years. But the interesting thing, one of many interesting things about Glenda Jackson is that she took this huge break in her career. 1992, launched a 23-year hiatus from acting to serve as a member of Parliament, actually. But then came back and with success. She actually finally won a Tony Award in 2018 for a revival of Three Tall Women. So that's just, I don't know, I just think that's amazing. It kind of speaks to what I've talked about before, working with Bob Dix on the last Frankenstein, how, it'd been like, 40 years since he'd been before in front of a camera when he came onto our set. And his process was completely on point. It was like he had just worked on a film the week before. You know, how he walked into a set and he just took in the set and wanted to make himself comfortable with the set because he knew that this was his character's house. So his character would be completely at home in this environment, and just really kind of taking in time to think about what would be natural for his character. And also even just, making suggestions about dialogue, but without being pushy, like he wanted to rewrite it, but just things that he felt would make it seem a little more natural to his character. That kind of craft that he had it, dropped at all in all these decades. And again, Glenda Jackson, it's over 2 decades she went without acting of any sort, and then comes back and wins the Tony. So it's just I love that stuff. I love that. It just kind of speaks to I think, in my opinion, it kind of speaks to how much they love what they do. The ability to, uh, again, without any drop in quality, just return to this craft, this art, this field that you hadn't really been involved in for decades, and be able to return to it with just the same level of skill as you had when you were doing it full time and all the time, and it's just incredible. So again, and again with her actually, the Romantic English Woman, I just picked up that was in one of Kino Lorber's going out of print sales. Um, so I want to check that out. And Michael Caine, who's in that movie with her, he actually just made what will be her last film. They made a movie together called The Great Escaper, which is currently listed as being in post production. And in it, Michael Caine plays a World War II veteran who has to escape from his care home to attend an anniversary of the D-Day landings. And yeah, he and Glenda Jackson are the stars of that. So looking forward to that when it comes out. And lastly would be Frederic Forrest, who just passed away just the other day, it was reported. Age 86. Um, Arguably best known for his many collaborations with Francis Ford Coppola, which started with The Conversation. Probably, though, Apocalypse Now, the second film they did together, is the best known of his work with Francis Ford Coppola, where he played chef. And then he went on to star in the box office failure, unfortunately, Went from the Heart, which was Coppola's kind of tribute to the old school movie musicals. He starred in Hammett, which was produced by Coppola. Coppola did not direct the movie. It was actually directed by the famed German director Wim Wenders, but the film went through that film also uh, was a box office disappointment. Very troubled production. The final cut wasn't really even Wenders' cut, but it does have a cult following. And lastly was Forrest's appearing in Coppola's Tucker, The Man in His Dream. But his Academy Award nomination, Frederick Forrest, was an Oscar-nominated actor. That actually came for his role in the Bette Midler film The Rose, directed by Mark Rydell, Best Supporting Actor nominee for that. But lots of other great credits in his filmography. He was in Arthur Penn's The Missouri Breaks. He was in When the Legends Die, which was really his first starring role opposite Richard Widmark. Showed up in Valley Girls. Worked again with Wim Wenders in The End of Violence. He was in the cult classic Dion Brothers, which is also known as The Gravy Train. And he was Captain Jenko on the small screen in the first season of 21 Jump Street for like the first half of the season. Appeared in a number of critically acclaimed TV movies too, like Path to War and Citizen Cone. But yeah, great career. Had been a while since he'd been in anything. The last movie he was in was the remake of All the King's Men, which came out in 2006. So it'd been a bit since he had been in anything, but I had noticed that he had just not too long ago, I don't think, come onto Facebook and started his own Facebook page and stuff, and just to connect with his fans. So glad he was able to get to have that opportunity before he passed on. Now, in terms of new releases coming out, there have been a lot of really hot new announcements. Kino Lorber is going to be putting out The Monster Squad, the classic 80s horror film, on 4K. They're also going to be providing the U.S. Blu-ray debut of Death Wish 5, The Face of Death, which had a Blu-ray release in Australia and Germany, maybe some other countries too, but this is its initial Blu-ray release in the States. And also they kind of did a very soft announcement that they're also going to be putting out Death Wish 4, The Crackdown as well, which did have a prior Blu-ray release from MGM. But once Death Wish 5 hits the streets, that will mean that all 5 original Death Wish movies will have American Blu-ray releases. So cool to see that. Severin Films is having a sale in about a week, actually less than that. I believe it starts June 30th. And because of the sale, they've been posting a lot of new releases that are going to be coming out and available when the sale starts. This is their Severn summer sale, and some really interesting stuff in that. But just real quick, the last horror film, which reunited Caroline Munro and Joe Spinell from Maniac, that's going to be getting a 4K release, and the Psychic Lucio Fulci movie, that's going to be getting a 4K release, and just announced today is Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, which is also known simply as Nightmare. That too will be coming to 4K. And actually, a really proper restoration of that film has supposedly been in the works for a while. It was originally teased by Massacre Video, and I don't know if they assisted in any way with this Severn restoration, but you can tell it's definitely a trip to get this one out. Even just by the description of the release, it says that it has been scanned, quote, from the internegative and various foreign print sources to create the most complete version ever assembled, end quote. Yeah, there was I think a couple prior Blu releases of this one over here from Code Red, another over across the ocean from 88 Films, but really a definitive, uncut, restored version of this film has not happened yet until I assume that the Severn will be the definitive word on this. It's coming with a UHD disc, 2 Blu-rays, tons of bonus features, including, very interestingly, Michael Felsher of Red Shirt Pictures has finally convinced legendary effects artist Tom Savini, the man behind the unforgettable gore of such films as Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th, Maniac, Martin, Day of the Dead, to finally talk about his involvement with this film. Because there's always been the story that Savini worked on the movie in some capacity of effects, and other people have said that he denies it, and other people have said, no, there's a shot of him on the set. He had to be involved in it, and it's just kind of like this horror movie, cult movie, urban legend that finally will be getting the definitive answer on with this release. So lots of cool things going on there. The one thing I really want to touch on real quick, which what's today, the 26th, so this will go up tomorrow, the 27th, is that the UK label, and actually they have a US branch now, but Indicator, which is best known as a UK label, unfortunately, they are going to have to delete a handful of titles from their catalog. All these movies were made by 20th Century Fox, and because Fox is now owned by Disney, and because Disney is not really looking to license any titles out at the moment, they were unable to relicense any of these movies for continued release. This has kind of happened here a lot with Kino Lorber. They've had to unfortunately allow a lot of their Disney licensed properties to fortunately go out of print, because even though some of them have sold well, Disney's just not willing to relicense this stuff. And Disney's history is that they don't really have a problem licensing their stuff to other companies as long as it's not the Disney branded stuff. So Disney owns lots of other stuff too. They own the ABC library, they own the David Selznick library. And in the past, or even stuff like Hollywood Pictures, Touchstone stuff, they haven't minded licensing that stuff out. But then, of course, when Disney Plus came about, they kind of started to tighten the reins on licensing, presumably to have more content to drive people to their streaming service. I can't say for sure. And then they acquired Fox, and which prior to the Disney acquisition had not been an issue, licensing movies from Fox. But now that they are part of the Disney stable, it is a problem too. So there were 6 Fox titles that Indicator had licensed back when they kind of, not too long after they started out a bunch of these. And June 30th, one of them's already out of print. One of them, because what Indicator does is everything's initially released as a limited edition, and usually what's in the limited edition is a booklet. And I think that early on they might have included DVDs too. I can't remember. And sometimes limited editions have different packaging. Contents generally, I think it's almost always been the same. But there is, like I said, you get a booklet in the limited edition, and you get sometimes different packaging. And once the limited edition sells out, they just re-release it as a standard edition without the booklets. So one of these titles that they had gotten from Fox was The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds, the 1970s drama starring Joanne Woodward and directed by Paul Newman. And that had already sold out, the limited edition, and they had announced, all right, we're going to do a standard edition of this. Unfortunately, this is when they found out that Disney was not going to relicense these titles. So they can't even do the standard edition of that film. So that is officially out of print from them. And what sucks is that it did have a U.S. Blu-ray release of that movie, put out by Twilight Time, but that also sold out a long time ago. So definitely, if you can find a copy of that film for an affordable price, grab it sooner rather than later because that's going to start to go up. But the other five titles, three of them, like the effect of gamma rays, three of these titles the Indicator put out in the UK um, had US releases, same transfers on the US releases. Uh, and all three of these had been made available in the US from Twilight Time. Unfortunately, as with the effect of gamma rays, all three of these films, the Twilight Time editions, are sold out and out of print. And so June 30th is when they have to pull all these Fox titles from sale off their website. I'm sure that they'll still be, I would imagine they'll still be available for a little while after that on like Amazon UK or, maybe different indie sites like Diabolic. I'm not sure. I haven't really checked their stock levels. But that's when Indicator themselves will have to pull these. So the three that are going out of print that did have U.S. Blu-ray releases, which are also out of print, were The Snake Pit, the famed film that looked at mental institutions that starred Olivia de Havilland in an Academy Award-nominated performance. Dragonwyck, which was the directorial debut of Joseph L. Mankiewicz, and which starred Gene Tierney and Vincent Price, kind of a gothic horror film in the vein of more in the vein of films like Jane Eyre. It's more heavier on the gothic than it is to horror, but it does get thrown in with the horror genre a lot. And Price, I remember, considered it one of his favorite films. And the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, the Roger Corman movie, where Corman actually had an opportunity, one of his handful of opportunities to direct for an actual studio, one of the majors. He directed this for Fox, and got Jason Robards and George Segal. So those three are the ones that had similar U.S. releases. Then the other two movies that are going out of print as of the 30th were ones that these are the only Blu-ray releases these movies have had, and that would be The Third Secret, which is a 60s kind of suspense mystery intrigue film directed by Charles Crichton, who did A Fish Called Wanda and In the Lavender Hill Mob, and it stars Stephen Boyd from Ben-Hur and Fantastic Voyage. And the other is Little Murders, which is one of two movies. I think it's only two movies. Maybe he's directed more, but I think it's just two feature films that Alan Arkin had directed. And it was an adaptation of the black comedy stage play. It came out in the 70s. Really interesting cast. Donald Sutherland, Elliot Gould, Vincent Gardenia. Arkin himself is in it. So those two, that's it in terms of Blu-ray releases. And the cool thing is right now all five of these titles are part of the 3 for £20 special. So Indicator always has this special going on with certain titles. You can pick up three of them for £20, which I believe translates to $22 American money. So all these titles, which are going to be discontinued in just a few days, are part of the sale. So if you can, pick them up now. There are if you want to get all five, you can throw in another title from the 3 for £20 section that's not going out of print, which is what I did because there's only two of these I needed to get. I hadn't picked up The Third Secret or The Snake Pit yet, so when I saw this announcement, I threw them in my basket, and also decided to get a third movie, which just so happens is our movie of the week, and that is the 1978 horror film The Legacy. So how about that for a smooth transition to our film that we're going to talk about tonight? So The Legacy is a film, it's one of those movies I had been familiar with in terms of like its existence. I knew that, I knew the poster art for it. I knew it was directed by an early directorial effort from Richard Marquand, the British director, who we'll talk about more later. And I think one of the bigger things I knew about it was that it starred Catherine Ross and Sam Elliott, and it was this film, even though they had both worked on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid back in 1969, it was this film where they actually connected with each other and fell in love and began the relationship that eventually led to marriage in 1984 and that still exists to this day. But it wasn't until I checked the trailer out when I was looking for a movie to round out my Indicator order that I was like, oh, wow, this actually looks really interesting. And I know Sam Elliott is not a big fan of the movie. He was on Mark Maron's podcast, and I can't remember his exact words, but he basically referred to it as like a piece of shit. But I saw the trailer. I was like, oh, this looks like it could be a lot of fun. And that's exactly what it was. It was a lot of fun. Not without its flaws, but a lot of fun. So Catherine and Sam, they play Maggie and Pete, an American couple um, who are architects and who get hired to do an interior design job in England. But they're not told what exactly the work's going to be beyond that it's interior design. They're not told who's uh, recommended them for this job. So they have kind of concerns about it. So they decide, well, let's just go over to England. It'd be nice to go over there and visit for a holiday. Um, and kind of in the days leading up to when we were be expected to report to this job, just kind of research it and kind of feel it out and see if it's something we want to do. Well, they're not over there very long before they get in a motorcycle accident with a chauffeured limousine owned by a very wealthy man named Jason Mount Olive, played by the great British character actor John Standing. And their motorcycle's out of commission and is going to be repaired by a mechanic in a local village. So Jason Mount Olive says, well, why don't you, until it's repaired, you come to my estate and you can just spend some time there. So they arrive there and find that it's basically just occupied by the staff, kind of overseen by this nurse named Evans, played by Margaret Tyzak. And not terribly long after that, they find themselves joined at the this massive estate by a group of guests of Jason Mount Olive's, 5 people. A hotel magnate, played by Lee Montague, the head of a publishing empire, played by Hildegard Neal, a successful madam, played by Marianne Broom, a World War II German officer turned weapons manufacturer, played by Charles Gray, and lastly, a music promoter, played by Roger Daltrey of The Who. And these guests, who all know each other, have arrived at the estate because Mount Olive is going to be passing away. He's ill and will be dying shortly, which in and of itself raises alarms because we have seen Mount Olive as a seemingly healthy younger man, probably in his 40s, late 40s. But at every mention by Maggie or Peter of having been given a ride by Mount Olive back to the estate, they kind of get these double looks, these strange glances from these guests, as if they don't quite. They're surprised to hear that Maggie and Peter are actually able to see Mount Olive. And we, as the viewer, quickly realize that Maggie's arrival at this estate is not so unplanned and accidental as everyone may be led to believe. That there's actually something larger going on here, something much more sinister, that there's a darker forces in motion. And when Maggie is asked to be a part of a ceremony, just Maggie, not Peter, is asked to join in with the other guests as the ailing, dying Jason, who now is hidden and obscured behind medical curtains attached to all kinds of equipment, makes known his final requests and his final plans. It's then that even Maggie finally becomes aware, and Peter subsequently too, that not as all as it seems. But they try as they can, they find it difficult to leave the estate because of the forces at work. And then people start dying in creatively gruesome ways. And Maggie suspects perhaps there's something of the occult behind all that is transpiring. This film's script, the story for is credited to Jimmy Sangster, who also gets co-screenwriting credit. And Sangster is synonymous with the legendary gothic horror film production company out of Britain, Hammer Films. He's really key to that company's successful transition into horror in the later 50s. He penned their first 2 Frankenstein films, The Curse of Frankenstein and The Revenge of Frankenstein. And The Curse of Frankenstein, even though Hammer had made some genre films prior to that, that was the one which really is the beginning of this reign of gothic horror that company had. It made Peter Cushing into a horror movie star. And likewise, for Christopher Lee, Sangster penned Horror of Dracula, the first of their Dracula films, and that made Lee into a big movie star. And he also wrote the following 2 Hammer Dracula entries, The Brides of Dracula and Dracula, Prince of Darkness. He wrote The Mummy, again, Cushing and Lee in that film. another one of their iconic movies from that era. And just with those titles, you have basically the foundation for not only Hammer's success um, in the horror genre, but also the foundation for this new, popular, very successful interest in Gothic horror, which to me would seem to pave the way for Roger Corman's Edgar Allan Poe movies in America, and for all, of course, the Gothic horror films that would come out of Italy. And Sangster is one of the major creative forces behind that. And he would continue to write other Hammer films as well. I mean, stuff like The Nanny with Betty Davis. He wrote Paranoiac with Oliver Reed. Um, and this was his brainchild, really, the legacy. But he had a different vision for it. He had imagined the setting actually taking place in Detroit in a rundown hospital setting. But then it was changed to its current incarnation. And it would have been interesting, definitely, to see what that would have been like, that original idea for the film. But one of the things I actually like about this movie is that the skeleton of it is an more old fashioned horror film. It's definitely more than that. They build upon that skeleton with muscles of like I said, very creative kill scenes. They develop a true sense of a dread and fear and terror throughout the film. They do truly communicate the sense of mystery about what really is going on at this estate. What is the force that is at work? But underneath all that is this classic old-fashioned Gothic horror story, similar to The Old Dark House, really, the famed 1932 Universal horror movie, of people being stranded at this isolated country estate with somewhat odd, don't want to quite go as far as saying eccentric, but definitely odd characters who may have malevolent natures, or around whom malevolent things are happening. And so that's one of the things that really appealed to me about it, is it's this kind of successful updating to the late 1970s of what is this really kind of classic horror story idea. I think it's also really good that they had these two very American people in the lead. I mean, Sam Elliott is, you can say that's about as American as it gets. But I thought their presence, without ever feeling forced or heavy-handed, just made for a nice contrast, because they're surrounded by all these great British character actors, and they themselves, though, are very, very talented actors. I think sometimes you can forget just how good Catherine Ross and Sam Elliott are. I mean, Catherine Ross is one of the most beautiful women who ever was filmed, and I think that sometimes that can make you lose sight of the fact that she's also a really strong Academy Award nominated performer. Got Best Supporting Actress nom for The Graduate, and likewise Sam Elliott, just because he has almost this like larger than life image through all the films he's done over the years, and all the westerns and stuff like Roadhouse and the mustache. Again, I think people forget. I think that he's a really talented actor, a really good performer, and so they make a nice juxtaposition to the setting and to the other people at work in the film. And Sam Elliott's just got that. I mean, he really uses it well in this film. That great wild-eyed look he gets that just fully communicates what the hell is going on here, and he really breaks loose with that at several moments in the film to great effect. And like I said, that supporting cast, really good players, some really good players in there. Now, Margaret Tyzak, who I said plays Nurse Adams, kind of the runner of the household, wasn't really even familiar with her before, and she's basically seems, I looked at her filmography, and she's kind of just like a veteran character actor, British character actor. She had a recurring role in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which might be her best known work. She was also in 2001: A Space Odyssey and the classic miniseries I, Claudius. But she just gives that, so traditionally British minimalist performance that easily communicates that there is something far more sinister to her character than you may ever be aware at face value. She comes across as completely professional and completely polite. There's no twirling mustache or evil cackles, but you just know, that she's probably on some level, the Nurse from Hell, and just 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 a great performance. But also, big shout out to Charles Gray, who plays the role of Carl, the former Nazi officer turned munitions manufacturer. And if Charles Gray is not a name that rings a bell to you, I mean, you know him if you saw his face if you're a fan of classic 60s, 70s films. He played the criminologist in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. He was the head of the devil worshipping cult in the classic Hammer horror film The Devil Rides Out, and he played Blofeld, James Bond's arch nemesis in Diamonds Are Forever, following the performances by Donald Pleasance and Telly Savalas in the previous two films, and would be the last time we saw Blofeld in one of the official Eon James Bond movies until Christoph Waltz took on the role more recently. But he's a British actor playing this German character, and people use this word sometimes to describe performance, and it could not better be used than to describe Charles Gray's performance in this movie, and that is delicious. It is a delicious performance. He, just delightful use of the accent, the German accent, his command of his voice, his use of his tone is just incredible. And he's got really great physical presence too, and just a delight in every scene he's in. And Daltrey, real props to him. This was just his third acting performance. His first movie had been Tommy, of course. Followed that up with Ken Russell's Listomania, which he played Franz Liszt, and then The Legacy. And of course, you can draw the parallels between his character and who he was in real life. Both in the film fictionally and in real life, icons of the music industry. But it's just a really solid performance. It's something where I think it would have been really easy. I can imagine, Richard Marquand, who directed this was his first feature film, and of course by now Daltrey was a superstar. I imagine he could have done just about whatever he wanted to. It would have been really an easy situation for him to, if he wanted to play it loud, play it big, do so and get his way, even if it's not what other people wanted. And it's a situation where I could very easily imagine someone with such a background in music, rock music. They might want to kind of bring to this character all kinds of flair and larger than life decisions in their performance. There's a lot of ways this could have gone wrong, and instead Daltrey just plays it pretty realistic, pretty grounded. I mean, his character does have kind of a sense of humor to him. He does like to make light of some of the dark things that are going on in the story, and this is something pointed out by other characters. But it never seems ungrounded. It never is presented by Daltrey in such a way that you don't believe his character is real, or that you're just like, oh, great, this is a rock star just trying to be a rock star within this character. Trying to approach acting as they do being on the stage, and that's not what he does. It's a really good performance by Daltrey. Now, it's not a film without its flaws. I definitely think they should have found a different song to use over the opening credits than Another Side of Me, performed by British pop singer Kiki D. But hey, it's very 70s in a good way. It's got that kind of like late 70s pop feel to it, which is nice for the opening credits. I have a bigger problem with the fact that they use kind of like the orchestrations of that music at other parts in the movie in a wildly inappropriate way, where it's not the right tone for those scenes, which is interesting because the more horror-esque parts of the score by Michael J. Lewis are very good. Like when the parts of the score that are where they're really going for those horror moments and really trying to build a sense of dread. There's a very memorable tracks in the film's score. I think the film definitely drags a bit in the middle, not terribly long, but there is kind of this stretch in the middle where, and it's about a 100-minute movie, but there's a stretch in the middle where Sam Elliott and Captain Ross are making various futile efforts to escape from the estate, to escape from the property, and finding themselves confounded by forces larger than they, and that gets a bit dragged out. It's a bit longer than it really needs to be. We kind of get the idea. They're not going to, they're going to try to get away, but they're not going to get away. The film's only half over. We know that's not going to work out, and by dragging that on too long, it also kind of just what that does is it kind of waters down the suspense in that moment, the terror. But again, it's It's not a terribly long stretch. It's just like maybe like a 10-minute stretch in the middle of the film. Um, the script, it definitely has some areas of opportunity, shall we say. It definitely is one of those scripts which raises questions naturally through the development of the plot that it doesn't always answer. It's a film where you finish watching it and you would think about the narrative and also about the mythology that the film creates for what's going on. And it's not too long before you start thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, what about this? And why would this be that? And you go back to the film and you realize, oh, they didn't answer any of this. But as you're watching the film, you're having a good time, so that's okay. The film has both kind of like an actual ending, but also kind of like this, almost like an epilogue. And I don't want to get into spoilers, but if you've seen the movie or you go to watch it, you'll know what I mean. There's kind of like a moment near the end of the film where like, okay, the film's ended, and now we're kind of like in this Quinn Martin style epilogue moment, and that's just kind of weird. The whole tone of that kind of epilogue moment at the end of the film is just does not even begin to match up with what you've seen before, and again, just kind of raises even more questions in your head. But again, first and foremost, it is a horror movie, and it delivers as a horror movie. It's creepy, it's mysterious. It brings you in to this increasingly darkening, strange, frightening situation that Catherine Ross and Sam Elliott find them in, and it makes you hunger to see what's going to happen next. And it does it though also with a sense of fun. Like I said, like again, no spoilers here, but the way that some people are dispatched in this movie is are very memorable. I would even dare say Argento-esque, if that's not pushing the envelope too far. Um, it has some very nicely gruesome moments in it. I guess if I had to describe this film, I would basically say it's The Old Dark House, 1932, crossed with Suspiria, which maybe I'm not trying to oversell it. I'm not saying it's as good as either of those two movies, because those are two classics. It's definitely not. But in terms of just trying to describe what it feels like watching this movie, in terms of its narrative, in terms of its energy, in terms of the type of horror it puts on display, I think of those two films. I think of them coming together as one, and bringing forth this solid, flawed but solid, and very enjoyable, very entertaining a flick. So again, directed by Richard Marquand, British director. This is his first feature-length film, and I would say that as well as the horror stuff is handled, he does well by that. The action, the period more action moments, those stand out as a little bit weaker. Not that the film has lots of action beats, but it has some very distinctive ones. There's obviously the motorcycle accident, car accident. There's a fight Sam Elliott gets into with some of the staff at the estate as he and Catherine Ross are trying to get out of there, and there's also another near car accident in the film, and just these handful of action scenes. They do kind of stand out in how they should have been handled better. They definitely seem a little sloppy, which I say that with some hesitancy because this film was cut by Ann Coates, legendary editor, who won the Oscar for Lawrence of Arabia. And I don't definitely want to put any of that on her as an editor of these action scenes, which are very cut oriented. The action scenes, especially that, like the opening, both of the car accidents are very cut heavy. I don't want to say, oh, it's Ann Coates' fault that those didn't come off better, because there's also definitely some issues with coverage. Even in like the fight scene with Sam Elliott and the staff, there's some definitely moments there where the camera's not where it should be to really maximize this fight scene, or even to hide some of the stunt work. So is that something to be put more on Marquand because he wasn't skilled in that department yet, and his coverage should have been better? and Coast just had to work with that, what she had. I don't know, but it definitely those, like I said, those action beats definitely stand out as kind of weak. Again, even though there's not a lot of them, and those little things like that part in the middle where it drags a bit, the sometimes tonally off music, the issues with the script and the action scenes, those are the kind of things that they're not ever such a degree or to such a level that it completely derails the film, but it is the kind of thing that keeps it from being a great film. I mean, this is a good movie. I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely a horror movie I would recommend to my friends. But there is enough of those things here and there that keeps it from being a great movie. That kind of is. Those are the kind of things that distinguish the good from the great. But Mark Wand, after this, would go on to direct a total altogether, including this, of 7 films before his untimely death. After this, he did Birth of the Beatles, which was a narrative film and the only narrative film made about the Beatles during John Lennon's lifetime, and depicted their early years. Followed that up with Eye of the Needle, the World War II suspense film adapted from the Ken Follett novel, starring Donald Sutherland, which has a very strong following. And it's that movie that then led to his fourth and obviously most famous directorial credit, Return of the Jedi, because George Lucas, was looking for someone to direct that, and he saw Eye of the Needle. He liked what he saw in that, and that's what put Mark Wand in the director's chair for that film, and that came out in, of course, '83. So then '84, he did a romantic drama with Karen Allen called Until September, which I think just kind of came and went. Bounced back though with Jagged Edge, the Jeff Bridges movie, Jeff Bridges and Glenn Close thriller, which also earned Robert Loggia, the great Robert Loggia, his sole Academy Award nomination. And then 1987, his final film came out, the doomed Bob Dylan movie Hearts of Fire, which was really lambasted by the critics and had a very, very short theatrical run in the States. Kind of an infamous film, and actually was released posthumously because before it came out, Mark Wand passed away of a stroke. Very young, though. He was only 49 when he died, unfortunately. But hey, Return of the Jedi, right? Hey, even if that's the only film on your credits, you have a filmography to be proud of, even if it is the weakest of the original trilogy. But that's a discussion for another time when we can talk about Ewoks and such. But the legacy, yeah, this was released in the U.S. by Scream Factory on Blu-ray, and it was released in the U.K. by Indicator, which of course is the version I got. Lots of good extras on the Indicator Blu-ray, some interviews with the crew. Also has the 2 different cuts of the film. So this movie was originally released in the UK in 1978. The American release did not come until '79. And there's like a 2-3 minute runtime difference between the 2 cuts. It's mostly a case of the UK having a version, the original release version, having footage that's not in the US version. Although it's very, it's the deletions are very minimal. It's kind of just basically tightening up scenes. But the U.S. version also has a very brief scene that's only in that version. It's not in the UK version. The main transfer on the disc, though, is the shorter U.S. Version. They do have the UK version as well, but that's just in standard definition up-res. But they do have a nice featurette on the disc where they just play the differences between the 2 films, and I watched that. And again, yeah, the differences are very, very small between the 2 cuts. So yeah, I definitely recommend this, despite Sam Elliott's misgivings, to anyone who hasn't seen it yet. Again, this is just one of those horror movies that like you're always familiar with. You always see that poster with the white cat on it. And they hear the title, and you're like, that's just one of those. There's like this barrel full or pile of movies where you're just like, I know that title, I know that name, I know that cover. I'll get to that someday, and And finally, when you actually take the time to like really dig into the movie and be like, all right, what's the trailer, or what? Let me read a little bit about this. And like, oh wow, I really do need to check this out, and it lives up to expectations. Surpasses them even. Yeah, a really good film that I definitely think horror fans will enjoy. So I think that's going to do it for this week on Carpet City Cinema. Appreciate everyone listening in. Um, and please, again, just keep spreading the word about the podcast. And also check out those two movies I mentioned earlier from our last Frankenstein family. Planet B234, now available on Prime. And directed by Keely Sheridan, written by Jorge Luna, and starring Jorge and Odo Luna Caratini. And Break Glass, directed by our producer, Jay Leonard, which will be at the Jersey Shore Film Festival. Please give them some likes on their social media pages as well. All right, thank you for listening, and I will see you all, or talk to you all, I guess, next week, 4th of July.